Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our raw reaction review for Good Boy. A loyal dog moves to a rural family home with his owner, only to discover supernatural forces lurking in the shadows. Well, Luke, we have another horror movie dog in the lineup here. The ones that I always think about are Thor, for one. He's one that I'm always going to consider from Bad Moon, if any of you are fans of that film. But yes, we've got another one here with a dog centric, I guess you'd call it ghost film, supernatural tale, and all told from the POV of the dog. And I promise, if you're anticipating this movie to be like In a Violent Nature, but with a dog, it's not like that. It's definitely a bit more to it than that.
It moves way quicker, I think, than In a Violent Nature. So if you were kind of bored during In a Violent Nature, that didn't work for you. Good Boy feels like it has a completely different tone, and the way that they approach this, I think, is rather different. Just, of course, the story being completely different as well, this being more of a supernatural tale. And, we go out into this cabin with Todd, who's the owner of Indy, and we're kind of just dealing with a situation that, we don't want to unveil here as we're doing spoiler free, but it is really this more intimate, kind of condensed story. We're in one location for a lot of the time, and it is handled rather well. This is a very, very quick film. I think,
Hmm.
coming in at like 73 minutes or something like that. It moves very quick as well. You don't really sit in the scenes, even though this is pretty much one location for most of the time. But they handle the story rather well. It is very somber though.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to just the emotional beats of this movie, and I kind of like that. It's one that I wasn't necessarily like tearing up or having any moments of like, oh man, this is messing me up. Nothing like that, but it's one of those things where the film leaves you in a spot where you have almost like two interpretations of what's going on or kind of what's happening. You can take it for a literal sense of what it might be, or you can take it for a metaphorical sense of what might be going on. And I thought that when you explore the metaphorical side of it, it does get really somber, like you said. And I think that's a huge plus for this movie because I think the thing that they absolutely nail with this, not only honestly having a dog that is a very intriguing, very lovable, and just wholehearted, wonderful main character to follow. It was quite nice to watch Indy walk around and do his thing. It's just the fact that this movie is full of atmosphere. Everything from the somber atmosphere of what they're dealing with to then also the scary, almost supernatural ghost-like atmosphere of this almost haunted house.
It has a great eeriness to it throughout the entire film. They really set the table with something great here. There's a great cemetery scene in here that just really feels like October. This is like the epitome of a dark and stormy night. It seems like it's raining a lot of the time during this film, and it really just adds to those elements, especially as you're seeing things through Indy's point of view, So I think the director, Ben Leonberg, I believe that's how you pronounce it, he really had a correct vision in terms of how he was going to approach this. Like we said, this wasn't like an In a Violent Nature, but I think going into this, you wonder how are they going to make this into a feature-length film doing a POV from the dog and making it seem like it's going to keep running. But it really, right out of the gate here, it really makes you feel like you have a dog in this fight, so to speak. It's funny because there's a scene in here that I can really point to where there's a door that creaks open and Indy's looking at it, catches Indy's attention, and the dynamic here is so different. As we saw something like The Conjuring, what is it, Last Rites a couple weeks ago, and you look at that film, when you're typically dealing with a supernatural film, you have these human characters, and you're like, why are you going through that door? What an idiot. You instantly hate that character, but when you see Indy and it piques his interest as he goes through that door, it's like, oh no, don't go in there because you don't want to see anything bad happen to our main character here. And I think that was a big selling point for this, where you already feel invested and it adds to that tension. It adds to that atmosphere that we do see where this is the quick cuts that we see in terms of how they show Indy's POV, where kind of quick scans. And there are a couple things in here that I overlooked at a
Mhm.
moment's notice because you're scanning so quickly. as you're going through the POV shots, and it just works to that spookiness, to the eeriness here. So they had a really good grasp on how to approach a film like this.
Yeah, and I would say like the other side of that is it's not just like straight POV. It's like we get auditory POV as well, where it's like we hear things that we don't necessarily know if our human characters can hear, or is this only because we're in the shoes of, the dog Indy that he's able to pick up on this. There are certain things that like he picks up on as like smells and stuff that set him off before, his owner even notices. And I thought that was all really smart. You can tell they really thought this out on like all the different ways we could tell this story from the perspective of a dog. It is not just simply we're going to strap a GoPro to him and that's what we're doing. No, there's a lot more to it than that. And I think that that's probably one of the most like satisfying elements about this movie is because it never feels dull. It never necessarily feels like you're wasting time or anything's like, not moving forward. We feel like we are continuously on this story. Nothing lingers for too long. We're constantly moving towards this mystery and trying to figure out what's going on. And I got to give them mad props for that. I think that that's a really, you make that conscious choice at the start of making your film. And I'm glad they made that choice to do the work, put in the time, because again, this is another reason and another movie that kind of like shows why it's worth it. I think this is going to be something that's going to be pretty digestible, I think, for modern audiences.
And you talked about this kind of being, you could take it from a literal sense or a metaphysical sense. And I think I subscribe to that metaphysical sense. I think that works so well when you're dealing with the indie as our main vessel here, because as we know, dogs tend to have, a heightened sense of things that, human beings don't necessarily grasp. And I like that aspect of it, especially when you're dealing with a supernatural story here. And then those added elements with the owner, Todd, and what he's going through, you find this really, really big emotional roller coaster, I guess. You feel so invested in that story as well. And there's those spooky elements to the story as well, where, you're looking for that basic ghost story. They add in those elements, but the texture between Indy and Todd is really what I came for here, leaving, what they bring to those elements, what those characters have, and just what you're left with in that is just something so heartwarming because it's a man and his dog, and that's what a
Mhm.
lot of people can relate to, and that's really what they lean on in the story, while telling those garnished with the spooky elements to it. So, this isn't verbatim just a typical ghost story, and I think as we have talked about in the Sunday Scaries about how this has kind of caught fire. The trailer for Good Boy has caught fire, and it's going to be widened up to a bigger audience. It's getting more theaters. That is something where I wanna see how a bigger audience is going to take this film, because it is such a small film, but it's being released in more theaters, more people are gonna be able to see it, and I'm curious to see if people are just gonna go in thinking this is a basic ghost story, because there is a lot more in terms of the intent, in terms of the texture, and what we're dealing with on an emotional level, way more than just what we get with a typical ghost story.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that this one just to me at least, and granted, I watch a lot of horror movies, so do you. So it's like I think for us, this kind of I think it strikes that perfect balance between just like again, how much of this emotional kind of angle we're taking with it, as opposed to what's literally actually supernatural or what's actually going on. I think that that's a really nice mix, and I think that they don't overstay their welcome on either side. Like I said, we had a nice conversation before we started recording this, just kind of going through our thoughts and feelings on the ending, especially, and what we took away from it. And it's actually one of those things where, as I was talking about it, I got a little bit more choked up thinking about Indy and just what he went through and everything. And it's a really nice feeling because we don't often get that with a lot of movies. It's like some of our favorite movies are ones we can kind of sit with and chew on and digest and have these conversations. I feel like although this isn't like one of the greatest movies ever made or even one of the greatest horror movies ever made, this is unique enough and it accomplishes enough of what it's trying to do with the simple story, the simple layout, and again, just really sticking to the roots of, like you said, the man and his dog storyline, the two best friends, like friends to the end kind of thing. You gotta love it, and I think they really ace that, and I think that that's what's going to appeal to a broader audience. I hope they walk out of there accepting that, and they're not just gonna immediately sneer at whatever this movie is trying to serve them.
I hope so as well, because I think this one is really well crafted. Like you said, it is a simple story, but being able to build that tension, show us those scenes that really feel like October, like this is kind of a horror story. And, just those elements of a dark and spooky night. It really does feel like that a lot of the time. They really do build a lot of great atmosphere in this film. They had a handle on what they wanted to do. I just hope people aren't going to go in for that basic ghost story because this is way more than just that. They really wanted to tell a very intricate and emotional story, and it really does work. Finishing my viewing of this one, you kind of sit with it a little bit just because we've all had those elements of whether it's a cat or a dog or another animal that you grew up with being almost your first friend, and I think you feel
Hmm.
that here in Good Boy. And it is really sad in a sense. It's a melancholy story. And but it is so well done. It does have some spooky elements. There are a couple interesting scares in here as well. So, I think it's a little bit light on that aspect of it. So if you're looking in for that pure ghost story that's just gonna have you gripping the armchair and it's gonna leave you with some of the most intense scares, you're not gonna get that here. This is something where they kind of garnish in with a much more emotional story that does absolutely work. So this one, I am very eager to I'll see what people are going to digest from this because I know it's going to be in a lot more theaters than expected. I think people could leave here thinking it's going to leave them pondering, I think, in terms of
Hmm.
what you do take away from it. So this is a much, much more deeper story than what I thought going into it.
Absolutely. And yeah, for me, I think I'm going to sit with a recommend on this one. It's certainly one that I'm excited to hear people's reactions who I think are going to love it. And I'm also curious to see like just where this is going to fall for people because like again, it does have that kind of fall time cold weather vibe to it that's really nice and you can kind of see this being somewhat of a comfort movie for some people, even though it is very melancholy, very sad. I'm really eager to see where this falls for people, and it's just in such a unique way. It's just one of those things where they could have went for the easy punch of we're just going to torture this dog and make you watch it for an hour and 13 minutes, but no, they find a lot of different ways to not only make you feel happy, sad. It's very very in tune with the kind of story it's trying to tell. So I think that I can confidently give this a recommend and hope that a lot of you will go out and support this weekend.
There's a bit of a montage that starts this film, and I think it sets the table perfectly for your emotional investment in the film. You see it in the trailer as well of just kind of Indy growing up, and you kind of understand the relationship between Indy and Todd. And you, like I said, throughout this review, you feel so invested with what's going on here. They set the table perfectly with a lot of eeriness, a lot of tension that they build up. Indy's kind of like our detective throughout this
Mhm.
entire thing, and I just love only having the knowledge that Indy has, because it's very limited and you just kind of are able to soak in the story and those creepy elements that they exude on screen. So I'm going to go recommend as well on this one. I am very eager to see what people are going to say about this film as they walk out a Good Boy, as it is hitting theaters, what, Friday, I believe.
Yep, Friday. It'll be in
Um,
theaters Friday. Actually had a big expansion, so it should be playing most everywhere.
So I'm very excited about that. I think, people are going to talk about this not necessarily just as a horror story. I think it's got some great horror elements to it, but not just a horror story. I think just as a story in general, I think this could resonate for a lot of people, whether you're a dog person, a cat person, an animal person in general. I think could find this really intriguing. So definitely go out and check this one out. Really well crafted for being such a small film. I'll say you mentioned at the beginning of this Thor, Bad Moon. That is a guilty pleasure of mine. I know they went in a different route of than what the novel is, but I'd be very intrigued to see a werewolf story told from the
Oh
POV
yeah.
of a dog. I know we're biased here on the channel; we love our werewolves, but there are a couple scenes in here with Indy in the doghouse that he was looking out into like the fog. I was like, okay, this. I see a werewolf out there. I would be fully on board, but I am fully on board with Good Boy. Definitely a recommend for me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see what this team does next. Probably won't be dog oriented, but I think that they've certainly shown that they have a little bit more to say here than just trying to spook the pants off everybody. So, it's just going to be one of those things where we'll see where they go next. Maybe they go ultra disturbing. Maybe they just go into like a vomit dolls kind of like, era thing. Probably not. But anyway, that's going to wrap us up here, guys. We got a lot of fun stuff up on the channel. We just saw VHS Halloween, so we were talking about that. Depending on when you're watching this, we might have a couple lists hitting the channel. If not, keep an eye out for Friday. Got another fun video, a little something new, something experimental as we ring in the October season here. So certainly keep an eye out for that. So yeah, other than that, we got a lot of great stuff. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.